Hey, it's Juan in PSL. Just wanted to check out my beautiful town and talk a little bit about if you're an NYPD retiree or similar. Doesn't have to. It's not locked into just NYPD, my information. But as a retiree, that is what I know. So I'm going to try to speak on what I know and tell you Florida's an attractive place to work. I did see where the governor was encouraging people to move down here and work, and I think that's a great idea. I think you should work in a great place, in a community that supports police. The only problem I do see is that health benefits and the such. If you're working for a good community up north and your health benefits are great or decent, let me tell you something. When you come to Florida and you want to work, and rightfully you should, like I said, great community, real estate, all that stuff, you're going to have a rude awakening when it comes to paying for health benefits out of your paycheck. That's going to be incredible for you to even consider that. It's going to be incredible. I know somebody, actually a couple of guys, not just one person, but I know a couple of guys that thought it was a great idea to leave up north working, and where you get a package deal in your benefits, and you may not have the biggest salary. At least I didn't. I had things that may have changed now. I'm down here 23 years, but the point is, check what the agency or county or whatever jurisdiction you're coming to work down here for has for health benefits. It is huge. It is a huge chunk of your salary if you don't come with your own health benefits like I did. I waited till after my 20 years, and it was a long, full wait. I was dying to get down here. Probably near age 15 years of service when I have vested in New York. I think now you can vest in 5 years, but at my time, I'm an 80s cop that retired right after 9/11. You needed 15 years to vest. So from 15 to 20, I had to do a hard check on myself not to leave to work anywhere in Florida, just for the weather conditions, real estate. I think I was paying 4 taxes in New York, and I was working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. So I say that to my friends, and I say that to strangers just so they know New York was a hard life. When I was working down in Florida, a lot of people would ask me why I was always, up-natured, good-natured, happy, smiling, anything to that effect. And it was because I had my pension. I had my medical, dental, vision coverage. Like I said, and you guys that left with 8, 10 years, whatever, and they left with no benefits. And then they came down here for a family of 4, husband, wife, and 2 kids, and still in school age. They were paying around $1,500 a month. And the number I'm quoting is at least 15 years old. I haven't kept touch with some people to see what the number did rise to, but you better believe it did rise. I mean, numbers in insurance coverage don't go down. And that was sad. That was sad. The guy having 8-10 years coming down here to work. I mean, you're young enough to work, you should work. I mean, if you're up north worker, you're going to appreciate, you're going to be smiling. Everything is easier. There is some congestion in, southeast Florida to the end. Down in those communities, there is some congestion, but for the most part, I did interview for local jurisdictions, and several of them did call me to work uniform patrol, county patrol, city patrol, whatever. But I was lucky enough to work for the school board as law enforcement. And by doing that, I was able to stay in my town. I worked my whole county. I drove 80 to 90 miles a day. But I was in my own county, in my own jurisdiction. I had to be a reserve deputy to keep my job because they wanted law enforcement certification, and the school board wouldn't give you that, wasn't qualified to give you that, or didn't care to give you that, whatever the option you pick it. But the point is, I got to work in a great environment, great system, and I was lucky to get almost 14 years in before my knee knocked me out of service. And I think it was a good career for me. I was able, Florida, you need at least 10 years and be of 55 years of age in law enforcement career to qualify for a pension. I did. I had both. All because I needed a new knee. If I didn't need a new knee, I probably could have worked someplace else. That wasn't gonna let me go because I couldn't pass the sheriff's physical and their requirements, physical fitness at the time. I was wobbly. I admit it. It was all line of duty injuries. That's another thing that's different from Florida, from up north. Line of duty injuries does not forgive you for coming back to work. They want you healthy and working in a specific time, depending on the agency. I don't know all the agencies, but my particular agency wanted me specifically ready to work, regardless if it was line of duty injury or not. Mine was, so I can speak on that. And I needed a knee replacement, and that's not something that's fast or quick. A quick replacement. You need months of rehabs. You need months waiting for surgery, and then finally, months with rehabs, and that cost me my job. One of the reasons cost me my job, and it is what it is. Like I said, I did qualify to be a teacher, a bus driver. I had my CDL. I had my 4-year degree at that point. I think you could be a teacher without a 4-year degree, but I had mine. It took me 7.5 years taking one class at a time, online to New York State University, State of New York University. And I just wanted to stress that out to you guys so you guys are aware. Great place to work. I agree with the governor, come down, work. I agree with any jurisdiction that's encouraging you to come down. The only thing is, they don't know how much different your benefits are going to be if you come down with a family and you need health insurance. You know, life insurance, health insurance. Or that was a package up north. I'm sure most major cities had that included, or at least I feel comfortable saying that. I haven't researched it, but anybody I met that was from, you know, a jurisdiction has their package with the health insurance, and you know, that's important. That's big. Now, working down here, they train a lot more than I did in New York. I remember going to the range and shooting hundreds of rounds between simulations of apartment house searches and car stops and, you know, obstacle course, trying to think the proper name for when you go around shooting at barrels with pictures, good pictures, bad pictures. It's a course. We had to do that. You had to qualify, and it was a lot of shooting. My days in New York back in the 80s and 90s, you know, I think it was a 50-round course. You had to get, you know, either 38, 40, 42, something around that to qualify, you know, some of the good shots. Of course, they got 46, 48s, and I've heard maybe even some 50s. But New York is what I can talk about. But I'm thinking up north, a lot of people are coming south. So it's not a New York exclusive video, as I stated earlier. But my information is based on being an ex-transit cop and then ex-NYPD cop after the merge. I was a detective with the Street Crimes Unit, and I worked plainclothes task force in several variations for about 15 years. So I had a career that I was happy with. I do second guess myself at leaving after 20. Some people that stayed to 25 got the raises that I didn't get. I did get 6 zeros under my mayor, and he thought it was okay to give the cops 0 raises for the year for 6 consecutive years. So, you know, you may like the guy. I'm not exactly a fan. He affected my pension for the rest of my life. And then the merge, of course, affected my pension for the rest of my life because I was doing, you know, 80, 90 hours overtime. And NYPD had a cutoff that could only take, I think it was 27 hours. I'm digging my memory banks because it was a long time ago. But whatever it was just a fraction I can take and pay from what I was actually working, a fraction. If I would have got the whole 90 hours, even with our miserable 0 raises, I would have, you know, increased my yearly income so that my pension would have increased also. So everything was affected by getting zeros, and everything was affected by having a cap. That's what they called it, NYPD cap. In transit, they only capped you after the October numbers, maybe the November numbers came out, and they saw which officers were top 10, and then somebody would yell and say, "Oh, okay," and then, you know, you slowed down a little bit, or you took more hours in comp time, which I did also. I did retire with almost 6 months on the books, and that affected my pension, but I just didn't feel comfortable giving it back to the city after I worked it and I earned it. So all those things play a major fact in when they calculate your pension. Yes, I hit the magic 20-year. I'm gonna get my benefits. I'm gonna get the good guy letter, so I can work anywhere, get a gun permit anywhere. And it did work. Like I said, in Florida, it did work. So the good guy letter was important. That's an important piece of your retirement package. Don't overlook that. Make sure you don't owe the city any time, because you have, during the course of your career, you had some suspensions here and there, or days taken off for disciplinary or administrative reasons. Make sure when they calculate your time, that's included. You don't want to retire 20 years and then have to come back and do a couple of weeks, as I knew somebody did, because they later on, a year or two after they're retired, because it takes the city that long to calculate your final pension or just to get to your case, because the city's so big and the agency is so big. They found out this guy was short, and if he wanted 20-year benefits and to continue with 20-year pension and everything that he thought he had earned, he came back and did a couple of weeks administrative. I don't know if they put him on the road or they just let him stay in the house and assist clerical, or something to justify that he was on the clock earning whatever time he was short towards his 20. I'm sure that must have been a conversation in the office. Hey, you've been retired a couple of years and you're back, this and that. Oh yeah, my calculations didn't work out. So for you guys that are getting close or calculating or thinking about retirement, that's something you should consider in your calculations. Make sure you have. I made sure I had, I think, 20 years and maybe 2 weeks, and I didn't have that much suspension time. If I can remember, I have very little suspension time, maybe a day. I don't recall any major suspension or them taking time off my vacation schedule or anything like that as a disciplinary thing. But I still made sure, having heard these stories that I'm telling you, I told them, look, give me a day, a week or two after my 20th anniversary, so that way if anything ever does come back, I got a week or two in reserve. So I overstayed my 20-year requirement to get my pension. Florida working is great. You're gonna meet people that could care less that you're a New York cop, and you're gonna meet people that are happy that you have all that experience. They may not say it to your face, but as a New York cop, Boston cop, or Connecticut cop, you've experienced a lot. Car stops, people stops. As a detective in the street crimes unit, I was required by my unit to make over 200 stops a night. And we were a 4-man car. We worked in cars. They had a deal with Rent-A-Wrecks. Rent-A-Wrecks, I think it was called, where you can rent used cars and use them. They were your patrol cars, but they were used and they were unmarked, obviously. So you can, I worked midnight shifts, so we waited. In my shift, we waited for the honest working people to get home and be at their dinner table and be home relaxing, and then we dealt with the people that were committing crimes and crime-prone locations. We addressed that. If there was a shooting, we were made aware of it at roll call. There was a shooting in this area, and we went there the next day, if not the same night, but usually the next day, to patrol the area. reason was either the person that got shot, him or his family or friends, might want to take retaliation, and they will come armed and looking for trouble, or the people that did the shooting were still in the area, or had increased, or were anticipating backlash, or were preparing for war, whatever you want to call it, depending on how big the situation was. So we patrolled for them. So it was kind of nice having the notification. It wasn't nice that somebody got shot. I'm not saying that. I'm not cruel that way, but it was brought to our attention. This is where it happened. About this time. Whatever specifics patrol had gathered and accumulated, and then we went and we patrolled, and guys standing there drinking 40s and smoking a blunt and committing minor violations were subject to at least speaking to, and then depending on your reasonable suspicion, you took it further if it needed to be, and some hotels, some projects and Section 8 housing has signs posted about loitering and drinking and stuff like that, so that helped us substantiate our stop, on top of the fact of the blunt and the open 40s and whatever threatening behavior was going on, if they were beating up on somebody, or doing a gang initiation, or just showing off their guns to each other, stuff like that. It was 200 stops a night. I heard, it was at the end. They decided to dissolve the unit, and they put guys in different precincts and different units and stuff like that. I voluntarily left to go back to my plainclothes assignment, which I really enjoyed, and just to get away from the street crime unit. Even though it was a great unit, it saved a lot of lives. I'm sure all those hundreds or thousands of guns they took off the street had to mean something positive. I agree with that. The only issue was, some people complained about the people that were being stopped. And even though, if you think about it, as a law enforcement officer, who's out there? Is a working guy minding his business. Is he gonna be out there? Yes, maybe. I'm not saying no, but is a guy smoking a blunt and with a 40 and in a group of guys, he's just inviting you to check into further patrol. I'm not saying everybody that does that is a criminal, but just the situation was that a lot of crime started with groups trying to prove to each other or to their members that they were earners. They were able to commit crimes, get away with it. I imagine the success rate was pretty good until the street crime unit and other anti-crime units started concentrating on them. And then it's taking guns off the streets is always a good thing. Young people walking around with guns, I don't see a positive Even if they're protecting their turf, as they would say, protecting their block, protecting their project, protecting whatever they feel justified in saying, is still unlawfully possessing a weapon by a person that hasn't been trained with that weapon, by a person that may shoot that weapon at a minor disturbance, because of a minor disturbance. That is never good. As a police officer, you are trained, that be firm, but be fair. And even if you encounter a civilian that wants to proclaim their rights, and they could be 100% wrong, as long as they're not violent, not threatening, not charging at you, not in the 80s it was causing a disturbance or making a crowd gather for no reason. Today you can make a crowd gather and you can make a disturbance. But there was, obviously different working rules in that time, and you as a cop in the 80s, you had to learn to adjust to the laws and the regulations, just like a cop today has far more rules and far more regulations than we did. And you have the body camera, which is a plus or a minus, the car camera, and then of course the people on the street recording. We didn't have that in the 80s. You patrolled on the subways. Sometimes it was one-man patrol, sometimes there was two-man posts, depending on the traffic or the incidents at that particular area. The kids knew you needed to use the payphone to contact your command, because we didn't have cell phones back in those days. We thought we were big shots around 94, 95, when beepers came out. We thought we were big shots. But then, of course, the beepers didn't work in the subway. So you had to be, every now and then, you had to go upstairs and take a breath of fresh air and hope that any beeps would, automatically redirect to your beeper, even though I'm sure that's not how technology works, where the beeper is waiting and standby until you're within range and then able to get the beep. But, like I said, it was new technology back in the 90s, and then of course, cell phones came out, but you had to talk fast because you only got a certain amount of minutes a month. So that was another adjustment to patrol, and adjustment to I think I got 60 minutes a month when I first got my first cell phone. I think it was called Bell South before they were Verizon, and that was kind of funny because that was new technology. And of course you felt like you're a big shot, depending on how many pounds your cell phone weighed, and how many minutes you had. There may have been people that had better plans than me, that had researched it better, or but it was funny because you learned to talk fast, so you only had 60 minutes, and it was something new technology. I think, again, it didn't work in the subway. A lot of the signal wasn't getting through those subway concrete, so you did the best you can. You used it on your way home to order. I used to use it on my way home to say I'm coming home, because I was always working overtime or whatever. And I also, if I didn't eat, I used it to call food on my way home, so I can pick it up and quickly and the order be ready in the time it took me to go home. I had about I think it was 51 miles homebound commute, and then I think coming down it was a little short. It might have been 48, 49-mile commute. So around 100-mile round trip commute. That's another thing I'm thankful for Florida. I interviewed for federal jobs up north while I was, getting ready to retire. As part of my retirement planning, I wanted to make sure that, I was young enough that I knew I had to work, and financially it was a good idea. So, everything. And then of course I wanted to always work down here, even though I never didn't know one person down here, but I always wanted to work down here. I wanted to experience it. So I interviewed for a couple of federal jobs. Of course, when I got down here, it was explained to me that Miami had 50 to 75 openings. But then I looked at the map, and Miami was an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes away each way. And I just did that in New York for over 13 years. And I was like, man, I bought a house in PSL too soon, or I didn't check the job market in PSL better to have a job waiting for me here, or at least in the process. Because those of you that work law enforcement know there's all kinds of background checks, credit checks, history checks, whatever checks. So you want to get the ball rolling in that if you have a job, or if you need a job, or you want a job, whatever terminology you want to use. But my point is, I failed in that thing, and those of you that are considering it, take my advice. Do whatever research you need to get the job done here, or job requirement here, and get it done. Get as much done as possible. Down here you need references from neighbors. I was embarrassed to knock on my neighbors' doors, even though I have waved hello and whatever, the mild how you doing or whatever. I didn't except for one or two neighbors. I think one or two neighbors I actually went in their homes, and we talked and we associated, and we introduced ourselves and our families, and we spoke about what we did or we didn't do, and it was kind of cool. But then there was other neighbors, either they had a different schedule, or you just left them alone and they left you alone, and now you got to knock on all your neighbors' doors. I think they wanted 4 to 6 neighbors and as references, and you got to say, hi, my name is Juan. I'm applying for whatever position with the county or the state, and I appreciate it if you can, give them a reference on my behalf, so that I can get this job. So for me, it was awkward. For everybody else, it seemed okay, not a big deal. Don't make a big deal about it. But for me, it was a little awkward. I mean, like I said, I'm not a bad guy. I don't bother my neighbors. I call it bothering. I say I leave my neighbors alone. If I need something, then I'll go over. But for the most part, I leave them alone. If they ever ask me for something, I'm definitely coming over, and providing whatever assistance I can or whatever guidance I can. But there's no for sale sign on my house. There's no, come whenever you want and ask me whatever you want. Is if you need something and you can't get it anyplace else, or you want a quick answer on a certain law enforcement issue that I may or may not know, I will help you. If I don't know, then I'll tell you, call this person or call that person, or call this county or call this agency. I can provide that kind of guidance. That's what I mean. But I've reached my physical therapy appointment, so this is Juan at PSL. I'll get back to you, and thanks for your time. So like and subscribe.